in the African continent alone, which is a third of the world's linguistic heritage. However, in the past couple of decades, the use of our mother tongues have been declining in our own countries as well as abroad. Um, 40 languages have already become extinct from all these 2,000 languages, and around 348 languages are endangered. And this was written in the same report from the UNESCO. So why do I think it's important for us to preserve our mother tongues? Well, I think that it's important because it's part of our culture, it's part of our identity, who we are, and our heritage. The languages we speak, our mother tongues, the languages we speak at home, these are the link that we have between the past and the present, future as well. And, it's what makes us who we are. However, because of the colonialism, for example, is one of the main issues why indigenous African languages have been dying throughout the couple of years, throughout the decades, and we've been studying and learning these languages because it's just how the world works. If you speak English, Portuguese, French, you are more likely to get better jobs and grow in your career, in your life, just develop in general. However, through that, we've been taught throughout the years that our languages are somehow, they're somehow, they're backwards, they're not forward, and they're a thing of the past, and it's something that we shouldn't be proud of. Unfortunately, I think that's a way of making us lose our identity. Mother tongues, they teach us who we are, and we learn from our ancestors through our languages, through our food, our cultures, our dance, our music. This is how we learn about our past, our ancestors. So why should we stop learning our mother tongues? We might not be necessarily part of, good for you to travel or, for work development, in the world, in this very fast-paced world. However, it's part of our identity. We should embrace it and not let this part of us die away with the rest of the history of Africa that we're still to discover, that we're still recovering, discovering. In Africa, it's been known that in schools, speaking maternal languages have brought a lot of punishment to young children, who spoke their maternal languages in school. It's a thing that's been going on in Africa for many, many years. And it's a very, very sad thing because basically what the schools are telling these children is that if you don't speak, if you don't speak the European language, then you're not good enough. Somehow we were taught that our language is primitive when it's not. It's primitive, it's backward, when obviously that's not the truth. So young children in school, even till this day, some schools in Africa do not allow children to speak maternal languages. It's unfortunate. I think it's a loss. It's a big loss that we're making there. And, also just people in general. A lot of households have also stopped speaking maternal languages at home, preferring to speak English or French or Portuguese, depending on which country you are based on in Africa, because these are the languages that were brought by colonialism, and unfortunately that's what we're taught, and that's the only way we can move forward. That's what we're taught, that this is the only way we can move forward, by learning only these languages. And I've also noticed while I was growing up that the children who came from poorer background were the ones who spoke their maternal languages, whereas, so it was believed, whereas, children who came from more middle class and, high class, they're the ones who didn't speak their maternal language because their parents did not want them to learn their maternal language, because somehow you're seen as an educated person. If you spoke, your mother tongue, you'll be seen as an educated person in the community. And I think that has stopped our development in a way of pride in knowing who we are, by believing that we can eradicate our languages, and we can only grow and develop in our own countries only if we learn the languages that come from strong economically grounds countries, for example, like English and Chinese. For example, now a lot of people in Africa are trying to learn Mandarin because of the economic growth of China. But one thing that we have to look at is, even when China wasn't the powerhouse in economy, they still spoke and learned and taught in their own language. Although they were encouraging, till now, I know that the Chinese community, I know that in China there's a lot of encouragement in learning English, especially English, because yes, it does help you get a better job, in the future, and it's an international language, so you can go anywhere around the world and you can speak English, and you'll find somewhere or someone that speaks English. But it's also because of the economy, because America and UK, they've been, strong economic, they've been very, very strong in their economy, so English has been, one of the main languages that people choose to learn as a second language everywhere. However, like China, they've never left their language behind. So now that they're growing in economy, everyone is wanting to learn their maternal language. Why can't we do the same in Africa? But another thing as well, some people, especially in the African diaspora, for the young people abroad, outside Africa, they found it very, very difficult to continue speaking their language or teaching the languages to their children, because for whatever reason we'll say that we don't have the time. Do we actually need time to teach our children our own languages? Why can we not just speak? For whatever reason, we believe that, we had to, in order to teach the younger generation our mother tongues, we have to sit down as if they're in school or something, but that's not really necessarily. You can just start speaking to your children at home and just, speak to them in your mother tongue, and they'll learn from there. Children learn very, very fast. And, when you start from a young age, it's easier than waiting for them to grow up and try to teach them when you're older, And it's also good for them, for when they travel back home and they go visit family, extended family, and when they don't speak, where the family doesn't speak French or English, you can always speak in your mother tongue. So I think encouraging at least one of your mother tongues to the younger generation is great. It gives them a sense of identity and pride, for where they come from, and belonging as well. Speaking the language makes you, even if you've not grown in the country, you're not raised in that particular country, when you go back and you speak the language, you already feel welcome by being able to speak one of the mother tongues from the language. One of the other things as well that is causing our maternal languages to disappear is the many, many diverse tribes and tribes and the different languages that are spoken in each tribe. So, some people think that because we can't all, in one country, nobody speaks, just one language. There'll be at least in each country in Africa, they could speak over 100 languages in just one country, so it can make it a bit difficult for communication, and it also has to do a bit more with politics, people defending their own tribe and wanting to be in power so they can look after the people from their own tribe. So that is also causing a bit of separation within the African communities, African countries. But I believe that if we just learn and educate ourselves, that no matter what tribe someone is, if you're from the same country and we learn to just love ourselves, we can improve, we can come out from that. It can help even the economy. Some people blame, the problem with the economy in Africa due to the different languages that there are. The different languages we have there. There is a writer, the CEO of Boomers International Limited, a social enterprise company in Ghana. His name is Kwabena Talwe. I hope I've said that right. And he wrote an article about 2 years ago called Indigenous African Languages Are Dying Out and It's a Good Thing. So, he's one of the people who believes, like his article basically said that maybe it's a good thing that these indigenous languages from Africa disappear. So in one country we can all speak one language. I don't specifically agree with that because we can say it's all because of the tribalism that goes on in Africa, tribes fighting against another tribe, even if the people from the same country. I think it's all to do with education. Once we start eradicating our languages, we're going to start eradicating the culture that comes with it, the food, the traditions, the beliefs that it's within that particular tradition in that particular tribe. And once you lose that, then we lose our identity. And then what do we become? We can adopt other languages. It's not a bad thing to learn, other languages. But I don't think that it's necessarily a good idea to completely eradicate languages. Also, making sure that in schools, mother tongues are taught, for example. In Africa, very, very few countries do teach their mother tongues in schools. They're not included in the school curriculum. And when they are, they're not really well funded by the government. So there's not enough kind of energy put onto researching the language and the tradition to be able to teach young people properly in school. I think that should be something that really our governments in Africa look into by encouraging our languages to be spoken in school and at home, so we can carry on this tradition to the new generation. And I also believe that the younger generation, we are much, the millennium, we are much more acceptable to diversity. So perhaps all this tribalism that is going on in Africa that causes so much damage and separation within people from the same country. I think the younger generation is much more acceptable to diversity. So, we're much more well-educated towards, I was well-educated in different cultures. We travel, we go abroad, we learn about different things from different countries, and we're more acceptable, more open and more acceptable to other people's cultures and languages. Why can't we do the same for our own countries? I think the goal here shouldn't be to eradicate the languages. I think we should try and, teach people that even if you're from a different tribe or culture and whatever, we are still from the same country, and we should embrace that. The diversity within our own countries, we should embrace that. and make it a positive thing and not a negative thing, because we've always made it a negative thing. That's why it's always been a problem. There are issues if a president comes into power in Africa, in the country, people, whatever tribe is from, the people from his own tribe always feel like they're better than the other tribes or the rest of the tribes that are in the country, and it shouldn't be like that. Or the president tends to focus more in improving issues in his own community, his own tribe, but not the rest of the country. So once we start eradicating that and changing that point of view, I think we can move forward and still keep our own cultures, tradition, and languages without, the need of eradicating anything. There's an old proverb, African proverb, that says, when an old person dies, a whole library burns down. So basically, because, older people can always tell us about the past, tell us the history, language, and everything. Once we lose that, that's it, it's gone. We should always make sure, by keeping in touch with the older generation, whether it's through language, a way of communicating with older people in our community is by speaking a maternal language. We should try to get as much as information from them as we possibly can, recorded. We've got so much, better technology these days. So if you have any grandparents who are still around, please do try to get in touch with them, talk to them, trying to find out about the cultures and traditions from your tribe background. It doesn't matter, just record. It's a positive thing. So it's who we are as African people. That's who we are. That's what sets us apart from the world. So we shouldn't eradicate that because we feel like we're not going to develop. I definitely believe that we can develop, we can grow, even by keeping our own cultures and languages, and passing it on to future generation. Our children, no matter where we are, our children will always want to find out their background. How can they go and find out about their background if they can't even speak the language? The language is the first place to go, especially for the African people in the diaspora. You start with language, and then the food and the music. Afrobeats is quite popular now. So, you have the food, the language, and it's the thing that keeps us connected to our motherland. So we should definitely teach the newer generation the languages. I understand sometimes it's also the fact where, people come from mixed cultures, mixed background. You could have two African parents, but they can be from two different countries like myself. And, there's an issue there of, do we teach our children a maternal language? If we do, which one is it going to be? Is it going to be your country or my country? That's up to you. I think it's a personal thing. I don't think that we should completely, if you're married to someone who's from a different country or even a different tribe, we shouldn't just decide not to teach our children a maternal language just because we fear that they're going to be refused on one side or another. But instead, teaching them the language will keep this going, will keep the family line going, will keep the history of who you are going. I know a couple who's where the husband is Congolese and the wife is a Polish woman, and they both managed to teach their children both languages, both maternal language. So the children speak Lingala and they also speak Polish. And guess what? They didn't even grow up in either of these countries, and yet those parents were so dedicated and they wanted to make sure that children knew about their culture and background, that they insisted on teaching their children both language, even if they never actually lived in either country. These kids, they're about my age, they could speak both Polish and Lingala, and it's so impressive. It's absolutely so impressive. Another fear for parents who live in the diaspora, not a fear, but I suppose people get lazy, teaching children the maternal language. Is like, oh, but at school they're not going to speak Lingala in school. For example, if you're Congolese, a lot of parents think, oh, but they're not going to speak Lingala at school. Who are they going to speak Lingala with? But the thing is, English is always going to be there. For those who live in the UK, they're going to speak English everywhere. It's always going to be there. This fear that, if they learn one language, they're not going to be able to speak the other language properly of the country where they're living in. It's unnecessary, because they can definitely learn both. I wasn't raised in the Congo, and, I was raised in Mozambique where they spoke Portuguese, but at home we always spoke Lingala. And I knew that from a very young age. I don't remember learning it as such, but my parents always spoke to me in our mother tongue, which was Lingala. And by learning Lingala, it makes, I'm so proud today for being able to speak Lingala, because now I can communicate with people from my country by speaking Lingala. I don't speak French very well. My French is quite limited, but at least I speak Lingala. It gave me a sense of identity. I know where I belong. I enjoy the food, the culture, the music, So the happiness that comes within me when I hear a song, when I can understand what the beautiful words or sentences are said in a song, or proverbs, when I'm reading things, it just makes my heart so happy. It's not necessarily because I know, Lingala is not an international language. Maybe it's not going to get me a job in other places around the world, but I'm very proud of being able to know that I can communicate with people from my own country. So I don't speak just for the people from the African continent. I think native languages all over the world should be definitely preserved and should be carried on to the next generation, as it's part of our culture, it's part of our identity and part of who you are. It can be hard sometimes, depending on situation. There are difficulties, like I said, for mixed children who come from, different background, have parents from different background. Sometimes it can be a challenge how to keep these cultures and languages going on, and making them proud of both, but it's possible. And it's better to do it from a young age than waiting for this child to be old and understand why they should learn their language or learn the maternal language. I didn't get proud of learning or knowing Lingala until I was much older. I just spoke it because, it was what we spoke at home. I didn't really understand the importance of me knowing the language when I was young, but now obviously I definitely see the importance. So I would encourage people out there, I would encourage everyone out there, no matter what country you're from, do speak your maternal language to your children. It's their identity, it's who they are, it's their history. So it's important for them to know, even if they just understand, it's a good thing. So my downfall for me, I speak almost 5 languages, and only one of these languages is a mother tongue. My regret is not being able to learn any other African language. I'm still working on that. I'm going to try. My country alone has over 240 languages, I think. And that's a lot of languages, and I can only speak one, but at least I speak one. There are people who don't even speak any. I'm proud of that. I wish I could speak a bit more. But there's also an issue of, for example, of mixing the new language. Apparently in Africa, they're developing new language. This is happening automatically as we grow, as we develop, which is a mixture of, English, or it could be French, depending on where you are, or Portuguese, depending on which country you're from. And the mixture of English, for example, in Kenya, there's this new language that is called Sheng. And Sheng is a mixture of English, Swahili, and other mother tongues, other local mother tongues. So it's, for some people, for the older generation, it's a bit of a worry because they're mixing all these languages and they're developing new languages. But then we let the older version of, original version of our languages die down, and it's just going to disappear. I don't think there's a positive to losing our languages, to losing maternal language. There's more positivity that will come out from preserving the native languages than there is, We are rediscovering ourselves as Africans. We are starting to rebuild our pride in being African, being Black and being African. So why should we get rid of our language? Maternal language is part of who we are, and we should definitely keep this going. So that'll be it for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this session. Please, let's continue the conversation in the comments. Do leave some comments. I would like to know what your point of view is. And don't forget to share and like. And yes, thank you so very much for joining. Have a good afternoon.
Que tu as fait à la croix, tu as pris mon fardeau, tu t'es donné un sacrifice pour que moi j'ai la vie, je trouve les chemins, la vérité. Non, 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 je ne peux plus porter seul mon fardeau. Non, 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 je ne peux plus être encore esclave du péché. Les souffrances de ma vie, à la croix je les amène. Les montagnes sur mon chemin, devant toi je les dépose. Abba, Abba, Papa, Abba, Abba, Papa, Abba, Abba, Papa. Abba, Abba, Papa, ne m'abandonnez pas, ne me délaissez pas, ne m'abandonnez pas, ne me délaissez pas. Tu prends soin de tes enfants, je choisis Jésus. J'ai parlé comme un enfant, j'ai pensé, raisonné, comme un enfant, j'ai fait tout. Une fois devenu